Welcome back to Journey Map, the Craft&Crew podcast where we dive deep into the leading minds behind the world's top creative agencies and industry experts. My name is Dave Hale, and today I'm joined by special guest Tom Conlon, co-founder and CEO of North Street Creative. In this episode, we discuss Tom's early discovery of digital design, how career challenges sparked the founding of North Street Creative, and what it takes to build and sustain a creative agency through shifting markets. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and thank you for taking this journey with us today. Mr. Tom Conlon of North Street, welcome to Journey Map.
All right, good to see you, Dave.
We have there's some similar elements to our stories of how we got here. We both founded our agencies in 2010, so I'm looking forward to diving in there and seeing what the world was like for you in that year that led you to get into this world of agency ownership. And you guys have done some really cool projects along the way, so we're going to dive in there. But I want to start at the beginning. So, Tom, do you define yourself as a creative person, a technical person, a business person? If you had to pick a lane, what is the Tom Conlon lane?
The Tom Conlon lane is definitely creative. I started off as it's funny, I discovered graphic design kind of by accident. It's I was always a kid that was drawing. It's funny, I'd moved recently and I found notebooks. But, once I started realizing what you could do with computers, I was like, oh, wow, I'm going to start doing this. And, but that said, it's so I run a creative agency. I have a creative mind. I was a designer. I was doing logos and websites. But I was also building websites, so I have a technical side. And then my career started actually in the magazine world. And so I was a writer and editor for magazines. So I would call that creative, right? Writing is creative.
And so what, as a child, do you have a moment where you were like, this is the first creative thing that you had done that you can put a stamp on and say, from that moment forward, you kind of identified as a creative person?
Well, I will tell you, this is actually interesting and kind of getting into the personal stuff, but I was a kid that didn't like sports, I actually played sports, but I wasn't interested in them. You know what I mean? So while my brother and my dad and my friends were all kind of they could rattle off sports stats like they were a dictionary. I couldn't even tell you who was playing. I grew up in New England, so I could tell you maybe who the quarterback was for the Patriots. And I actually grew up as a kid in the golden age of Celtics. So I could, I knew who they were, but I'm telling you, my brother and dad would fight for the sports page in the morning. And I could care less. I'd be looking at the art section.
Yeah.
What
movies are playing this weekend?
Exactly. And so, it's comics, weather, and movies. And so I did start to identify early on that okay, I was a little different. I grew up in a somewhat homogenous, New England, right? And so it was just it was oh, you like sports and you drink beer. And so I did early on was oh, well, I'm actually into music and not sports, and I'm into drawing and things like that. And so I think that was the first early indication. But I was saying, I was looking back through my notebooks and it's man, I was creating logos. I was creating bands just from scratch, drawing the characters and drawing all of the logo. I would draw album covers, posters. It was I was developing characters and logos and identities back when I was in junior high and high school. And I didn't really honestly, at that point, it was just my doodles. I took whatever required kind of art classes I had to take, but I never actually went on the creative, oh, let me go to design school. Let me be formally trained. I never went that route. I went to college as a history major, and then the timing just happened to be, it was the late 90s, right? It was 96, 97, 98, 99. And that's when the internet 1.0 was starting to blow up. And so I was just kind of right place, right time, just sort of started taking all these digital Adobe based computer classes. And I was whoa, I think I found my lane.
I bet if we were to take transcripts of our 200 or so episodes, plug it into ChatGPT and say, okay, of all the people who identified as creatives, what was a part of their start on that journey? Guaranteed designing album covers would be probably the number one response,
right.
Actually.
You know what I used to do? Actually, I had an old Mac, like the
one behind you?
Yeah, back when I was a kid. And I used to actually make mixtapes, and then I would design out and print out the covers, the sleeves to put into the tape. So I'd have all these, and I found those too recently. I had all these mixes that I had. I messed around with fonts and patterns and stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah. I similarly was clearing out some stuff at my parents' house and found like my Backstreet Boys Millennium tape and like Britney Spears tape. Yeah, wow. This is
Man, is it
oh,
crazy
this
that
is
like
wild.
I don't even have things to play? I moved recently too, so I'm like going through all my CDs and I'm like, I don't even know I don't have a thing to play these on. Like I have a record player, but like, I don't know. I'm thinking about getting a CD player and a tape player.
As part of this kind of like 90s comeback trend, if you go to like Best Buy or anything right now, like there's like
I know.
boom boxes, like old school boom boxes, like CD
I,
with CD.
I went into Urban Outfitters a couple of years ago and they were selling tapes. And I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
they're selling new tapes.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, so history major. So despite kind of this, like, taking these Adobe classes and kind of design centric, you said you do a history major. So, that's a little bit off of that plan or that path. Did you finish that degree or did you change or?
I changed, but I ended up minoring in history because I had so many credits. So I am still a history buff. I mean, I love American history. My favorite podcast is an American history / comedy podcast. And I read a lot of like books about kind of like early kind of New York. And like, actually, I'm really into like financial kind of nonfiction. So I do have this like sort of like analytical kind of interesting, like this like interested in history and the way the world works kind of side. So that's kind of what I went into college. I'm just like, this is what I like the most, so this is what I'll do. And I'll tell you one thing actually was, I remember my junior year, the beginning of my junior year, I think I calculated I had something like 150 pages worth of papers I had to write in that semester. And I was like, oh, no, being a history major is for me. That's not why I stopped doing it. But I was like, honestly, I went to Fordham University in New York City and we had to take, there was a core curriculum. So you had to take certain classes and you had to take electives. So one of the electives I signed up for, my 98, I think it was called Intro to HTML. And that was it for me. That was like, I honestly was like, Dave, I don't know if like, it's going to depend on the age of the audience, but like, okay, so I told you this was like 98. I remember taking an Intro to HTML class, which was very basic. So I bought the old O'Reilly, like HTML4 book and I like just consumed it, like learned how to do everything, started building websites for myself. And I just kind of remember I built a website in my classroom in like the laboratories. Computer lab. Sure, it doesn't even exist anymore. And I remember going to the library and I had uploaded it to a server. So I remember going to the library and calling up the website address and it popping up. And I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, I can't believe something I created on one computer now appears on another computer. And I can look this thing up anywhere. And if I want to change the page, like I can change it. Like it's a mind shift that at the time was huge. Like now it just doesn't, it just like, the fact that my phone, when your phone rings on your computer and like 10 different devices pick it up, or you start to like, you start to type something on your phone and then you go to your notes app and it's on your computer. It's like, that was nowhere even close to, that was like, just the fact that you could see a website on one computer and another computer was like huge at the time. So I was like, I'm really interested in this. I want to figure out what this is and I'm going to start doing this. And so I just changed my major to communications only because communications had the most like graphic. It was weird. Like the art classes at the time were all not digital. It was all like off. It was all analog. So the communications department had a really good, just like kind of, they taught you on Macs all the kind of like digital programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, and like PowerPoint at the time. It was actually considered a design program. So that's it, man. And then I basically just made my own major. And then because I taught myself HTML, I actually graduated I graduated in the year 2000 with a technical skill, which was unlike many of my peers, at Fordham. Right. They were going into marketing or they were going into whatever. And I actually had like a technical skill. So that got me a job. I got out of the market I got into the job market just before the bubble burst. And so like I actually got employed and I was on my way, but literally right after that, I think within like 6 months, my company had closed our team and moved everybody to San Francisco.
So what was that first site that you ever built or designed? Do you remember?
I now I can't remember if it was my personal site or the site that I did for Fordham. I probably did them at the same time, but I'll tell you the sites that I built was TomConlon.com, which I don't even think exists anymore. I have the domain, but I haven't done anything with it. I'm actually talk about this separately, but I've decided I'm going to actually mess around with AI and try to like create something for TomConlon.com. Like, cause I'm no longer actually like, I don't use Figma and I don't really build websites anymore. So I'm going to sort of take the opportunity to do that. But anyway, I built this like website for myself, which was hysterical because I have to find it. But I remember looking back and being like, and this is in like 98. I'm like, I had this like little manifesto where I'm like, all websites look the same. It's just one column on the left, one column in the middle, and one column on the right. I don't know if you remember, like in the late 90s, like literally every website looked like that. And then Flash came, right? And so Flash was like, whoa, you can do the websites, like you can make websites like almost like these like crazy interactive moving experiences. And so I had this little manifesto on my website about everything being boring and we should look into like technologies like Flash and frames, I even said. It's hysterical. And then the other one was actually I had a work study because I went to Fordham and I had, some scholarships, and one of those was a work study, and I worked in the intramural department, and my boss at the time was like, you know how to build websites? He's like, why don't you build me one? I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. And he's like, well, whatever you do is going to be better than what I have now, which is nothing, right? I was like, okay, fair. So I did. I built this website, and it's funny at the time, like I was doing it all in code. I was doing it all in Notepad on a PC, which is like has no markup. Like it doesn't show you, like it's just black and white. And so those are the first two projects I worked on, and like that website for my intramural department stayed up for years, which is funny.
Mine, which this time of year always is a good memory of this. Ironically, right before the pandemic, we actually moved back almost like 10 minutes from where I grew up. So, that's good and bad for anyone who's done that move. But as a result of that, I actually have to drive by this Christmas tree farm like often at this time of year. And that's who I did. My dad,
no way.
This is a very Canadian thing to say, but my dad did curling with the guy who owned the tree farm. And like, I was just starting out, and the guy, his name was Kenny. What a character. And he was like, saying to my dad, he's like, oh, I think I need a website. He's like, my son can do it for it. And this is the really funny thing is like, my parents had no idea and still don't have any idea what I do for a living. And so I did not know how to do a website, but my dad was like, hey, my friend Kenny needs you to do his website. And I was like, great, Kenny, it's $5,000. And he is like, deal. And I'm like, well, now I have no idea what I'm doing. It is the ugliest fucking website that has ever been created, probably in the history of websites, and like guaranteed did not work either. But anyway, so it's just funny that every time, like this time of year, I have to drive by Kenny's tree lot.
That's funny, man.
Like all the time. And I'm like, well,
another satisfied client.
Exactly. Yeah. The first of many. Yeah. But anyway, that's funny. Okay. So yeah. So you history degree, some vocational tech skills, but then you wind up in work for publishers and being, magazines and doing writing and creative work. So how does that come about?
Yeah. So my first job out of college was actually, I started it when I was in college. I had stacked my days so that I had 2 full days off. So I was able to get like an internship at Ziff Davis, which is a publishing company. And so, they were known for PC Magazine. I think Electronic Gaming Monthly might've been theirs. Computer Shopper, Yahoo Internet Life. I started working there in college, and then that's where I got hired out of college. And so I was in publishing from the beginning, but I was on the digital side. So I was working on the websites. And like back then, man, it was the Wild West. First of all, like, I don't know if you remember this. Everything was built in tables. Every website was built in tables, which was insane. And it's like all we were really doing was like repurposing articles from the magazine onto the website and then like selling subscriptions. So that's what I was doing. And I did that for like a year in college. And then when I got out of college, I got hired. And then within 6 months, the internet.com burst, the bubble burst, right? So my company, Ziff Davis, actually sold to CNET. CNET kind of moved everything out to the West Coast, or not everything, but my team got moved out. Really weird. I had a boss for like a few months who was in San Francisco. And this was way before Zoom and telecommuting. This is like the year 2000. It was so that's how I got into it. I lost my job like right 6 months out of college. And that was a different story, man. Coming out of college in 2000 with a technical skill, like the world was my oyster. It was like, I remember I would come back from class and I'd have 20 messages from recruiters on my machine.
Yeah.
And that 6 months later, after I lost my job at Ziff Davis, I started calling those recruiters and being like, yo, if you were knocking my door down, like a year ago, got anything? And they were like, nope. Like I was even going on like informational interviews. It was grand. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit of like the job market now. It was tough, but then I found this awesome job again, at a magazine. It was just a good fit. I had a publishing background. I had a publishing background on the digital side. The magazine was called FHM. It was sort of like an equivalent to Maxim back in like the late 90s and early 2000s. And I landed there as a designer and dev, and very quickly sort of just like became the kind of like second in command on the website. But even then, it was boring, man. I was literally updating the website like twice a month. And I will tell you, like, I mean, I will admit this now because it's 20 years later and I can't get in trouble. But like, I mean, my boss was allowing us to do it. Like I played the full like Max Payne video game, like at work. Like I literally had nothing to do. Like I literally played the game front to back. One day my boss and I even went and saw a movie. It was so funny.
Wild.
So I had made friends with folks on the editorial side and the magazine side, and they were just like, "Yo, man, like you're funny. It seems like you could probably write some stuff. Why don't you try?" I just tried with the video game section at first. That's all I started with. It was like a page in the magazine, and then I started taking on gadgets. And then at a certain point, I had two jobs. I was literally like, I was an editor for the magazine, and I was a designer developer for the website. I quit my job on the website. I was like, I don't know what possessed me. It was like now's a good time to get into print and like leave digital and websites behind.
Well, to be fair, print, at that time, if you followed the money,
stable.
Like if you followed the money, like
yes,
at that
it was
time,
stable.
Yeah,
it was stable. But that's how I got into it. So then I literally spent 5 years at FHM as like I became the senior editor. I was like interviewing celebrities, writing features, writing sections, and I stopped doing web design and development completely, like for a couple of years, which was an interesting time too, because when I got like CSS was king, and before that it had been like tables and inline everything. So when I got back, like technology had changed, and I was like, whoa, this is really cool. And yeah, I can kind of I can get into like how I got back into like building an agency, but that is how I found myself like in publishing and like establishing a writing.
Right. I think like, why I wanted to go down these paths to get there is that what's interesting about North Street is, and I want to hear how you, the elevator pitch and how you define it today, also versus how it was day one. But it is that you have a bit of that unique design, development, and writing background, which like, often when we interview people here, they're either the business side or the creative side, or they're a developer, not all three, not all of those things at the same time. So what's going on in your world in 2010 that you say, I need to create my own shop?
Yeah, it was like, I think this is a common story, but it was more kind of like accidental than anything else. I will say that magazine, working there was an amazing experience. I loved the people I worked with, and I loved the magazine. I loved the content. I loved the voice. I was responsible for like shaping the voice. It was like, I felt like I really had like ownership, even though I was just an employee. They, end of 2006, beginning of 2007, it was Christmas, it was around this time, actually, they brought us into a conference room and they're like, we're shutting down. We're shutting the magazine down. To me, like that was my first experience in the workforce being like, it was a body blow. Cause I was like, wow, like I really believed in this brand. And I worked late nights, weekends for it because we were a magazine. We had like deadlines, like printer deadlines. I was like, wow. And then like, and all of that can end like that without any sort of input from me or without having done anything, right? I didn't do anything wrong. I mean, I was doing great in terms of the magazine was doing great. And I mean, I was like, I was a member of the senior leadership. So I think that was it. I was like, I kind of right there. And then I started freelancing, and I was unsure of what my next move was. It's funny. I looked at other magazine jobs and I was like, I don't even know if I like working at magazines. I just wonder if I like working at mine. And so I was looking around for jobs, not really finding anything that I liked. And then I just started freelancing. It was like, I was freelance writing, I was splitting my week as a freelance writer half the time and like someone who was doing logos and websites on the other. I got back into it really quickly. I taught myself all the new tools, and I had friends just asking me, kind of like your dad in like the tree farm. It's like, oh, hey, can you do the website for my honestly, one of my first clients was a dating service, which is hysterical because like that's so far from what we do right now. But that's kind of how. And so that what ended up happening was in 2010, I got a couple things happened. I got a really big client who was demanding, meaning like in a good way. They just had a lot of work. And two, I started getting projects that were like above my head. So you were saying before, like, okay, yeah, I'm a developer, I'm a designer, and I'm a writer. But like, it wasn't like I was amazing in all three of those. So you know what I mean? It's like the jack of all trades, kind of master of none. I mean, I was good, but I wasn't amazing. And I was just getting these opportunities that were like, oh, this is going to take a developer who's like way, way more talented than me, or like a designer who's just knows these things way more than me. And that was really it was just one project I pulled a couple of people in on instead of doing everything myself. I was like, all right, I'm going to bring in this design resource, this developer, and I'm going to project manage it and see how it goes. And it went great. And that was the first like moment where I was like, oh, like I can do this. Like I don't have to do everything. I can hire other people to do things, but still do it under my umbrella. And 2010 is the date that we go with as the start date, because that's when I started working with a partner who's no longer part of the business. But at the time he was freelancing as well and brought a more like print and branding background. Like I had no idea how to do print stuff. Couldn't even set up a print document in InDesign or anything. And so that was really, we kind of met. We're like, hey, you want to just start doing stuff together? And that was the very beginning.
And so, like I'm saying to you, when we first jumped on, we actually also founded our agency in 2010. And, it was kind of like this post-recession housing crisis time. And I really, even though we were quite young, like we just made some decisions back then, which then years later, I've seen how that both helped and hindered us. But one of the things that we were really kind of focused on was doing work in some industries that maybe were a little bit less sexy or interesting. But, if you went down the path of another kind of recession, again, you'd be a bit safer. So I wanted to ask, like, how did you guys view like being a new business and kind of the back end of a recession? How did you go about thinking about growth, thinking about sustainability? Were these things on your mind, or were you just like, we just want to do cool work and get some clients?
Yeah, it was more the latter, honestly. It was like, let's get paid for what we like to do, and, it was an interesting time. It was hard to get a job, although I had kind of stopped looking. I was so young and fresh that I had no idea about like economic cycles and things like that. You know what I mean? I didn't know at the time it was like not a bad idea to start a business or a good idea. You know what I mean? I just kind of did. And, when you're starting out like that, I mean, like right now today, we define ourselves as like, we're very B2B. We work with, financial services. We work with professional services firms, and then it's like healthcare and nonprofit. But to your point, like that took me a while to get there. Like when you're starting out, it's like, oh, like I want to be the design team that works for Nike or works for Apple or works for whatever big brand that like, you can walk into a room and be like, oh, who are your clients? And you can be like, oh, Google, And so, I'm not sure if you have this similar experience, Dave, but like when we started out, we were literally doing like kind of almost anything for anybody. Like I can look back at our original projects. They're funny. We did a brand and website for that dating company. We did a print catalog for beauty.com, which I think at the time was owned by Walgreens, and they just wanted to do like a gift guide kind of thing. It actually came out around this time. And then we also did like live event projection where we were using browser technology, but we were building like these sort of like visualizations that could be projected on the wall of a party. And this was like, we were one of the first agencies to actually use the Instagram API to like call hashtag images into like a display. So we were kind of like, if you look back at like those three types of projects are so different for three very different types of clients. Like, and so we were finding our way. And I think It took us a while to do that, like, and I definitely like reached forks in the road. I mean, I'm friendly with a lot of other agency owners, and there's definitely times where like, I'm sitting in a room with them and like, okay, this guy, like, we're all kind of similar, but this guy is making a decision to become more of an app shop, right?
Yeah.
This guy's actually leaning towards being more of like a staff augmentation shop. And I was like, you know what, given my background, like I'm actually going to go more into like branding and, and like aesthetics and like brand creative rather than like the more technical. Like North Street's not an engineering shop, right? We've never thought of ourselves like that. We have a full-time dev team and we do great websites, but I wouldn't consider us like, we're not a software shop, but there was so many ways we could have gone early on, but the focus on branding was something we decided on.
Do you have a moment where it was like either a project or a specific hire or a new client win, case study award, whatever it is, so you kind of define as like almost like the turning point for North Street, where, from 2010 founding through to now, you've been around a long time, and I know what kind of energy that takes to maintain over 15 years. But is there a moment in that journey that you kind of look back on and say, that was it, where I felt confident that we would succeed, that, we were finally not struggling anymore, or like it put our name on the map? What stands out for you?
Yeah. I'd say the year 2015 was interesting for us because that's the year that we started a 5-year lease in an office. And that is also the year I hired my first project manager. So up until then, I had been doing all the project management. And, it's like you either do it, or you either do project management and nothing else, or you do nothing else. Right? Like I was not having success, like trying to run the business, like, actually like think about the business and whether it's going to be successful financially and how we measure profit and like what we pay freelancers and all that. Like I wasn't even able to think about that because I was in the weeds on projects, either as a project manager or as like even an active designer in those early days. And so I just remember laboring over this hire because I was like, what's a project manager do? I'm like, they're not billable, right? Like a designer or developer, like I didn't think they were billable. Like now I'm like, back then I was like, I can understand a designer. It's like those hours go towards the end product. I can understand a developer. I just couldn't wrap my head around. I could wrap my head around it. I couldn't wrap my head around like paying for it, right? I'm like, I'm going to have this salary here that's like, this person's not producing anything. Well, let me tell you, that's like one of the best hires I ever made, was just like bringing in a project manager who I just gave him all of that responsibility. And then I could kind of just pull back and focus on bigger things. And I'll remember, and this actually all kind of comes in. So then we also had enough stability to sign an office lease. And I just remember walking into my office. I had missed the morning because I had a personal appointment or something. And I walked in and my team was in a meeting with a client in our conference room that I wasn't even on or didn't know about. And I'm like, yes, this is amazing. Like this is going to work. This, like I don't have to do every little thing. Like we're gonna, this is something that's like possible here. So that was 2015.
Well, 2024, you guys had a very interesting year as well, in that if you go to the listeners, if you haven't already gone to the North Street website, one of the things you'll notice under the work section is Tom and team's work for the Kamala Harris campaign. So politics aside, and there's been too much of that, I think everyone can say in 2024. So this is not a political podcast, nor will it be. What I wanted to focus on for that project is, and you kind of reference this in the case study as well, but was it just like one night or one day you get a phone call and it's basically like, hey, we need this site tomorrow because we weren't expecting this, and now we got to throw this candidate's hat in the ring and get moving here. So what is that entire experience like?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was so first of all, this was all possible because North Street is a partner of WordPress VIP. So that's WordPress's like premium hosting platform, and WhiteHouse.gov and JoeBiden.com were hosted on WordPress VIP. So that's just how the initial connection was made, that we were even like in this universe. Now, the project originally actually landed on the desk of this agency called VAST. They're based in Philly. They are small but mighty. And I'm friendly with the principal, I'm friendly with the owner. And he called me and was like, hey man, I've got this crazy opportunity to do the Joe Biden website. So Joe Biden had just kind of gotten flattened at the debate. And it was like, okay, Team Biden was like, he needs to be repositioned. Like we need to do something. And so I don't know, there was this idea to like jazz up his website. Like I think they were going to do some rebranding, do some messaging, but then they needed to like, make the website better. So, and it was like a 2-week thing. So Andrew at Vast called me. He's like, hey man, I need to pull somebody in on this. I can help manage it, but I can't do the whole thing. He's like, can you do it? Can you do this website in 2 weeks? And I said, I absolutely can. And the only reason I could do that, Dave, is because we have, over the last 15 years, have had this like part of my business that is so unique. It's hard to describe, but basically like we have a relationship with with a strategic communications agency. Their clients are like the biggest companies in the world, and they do comms around shareholder activity, like shareholder votes. Like if two companies are merging, or there's like an activist investor wants to get involved and like change the board. If there's a big product recall, whatever, like these guys get involved. And they do all the comms work. Like we have nothing to do with like the messaging, but they need a website and they need a website to go very quickly. And over the last 14 years, we've gotten so good at building these like, there are these like informational websites. They're probably 5 to 7 pages. They're based on the branding that like kind of already exists, but we build them out in WordPress so that the comms team can edit it themselves, because these edits are happening like literally like at midnight and they don't want to have to like rely on a dev. So that's just this part of this business that we've been doing. We've gotten really good at it. And so I know sometimes I get a call on a Thursday and I have to launch a website by Monday before the market opens. And so this would be no problem. And then he's like, it's Joe Biden. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. It doesn't really change anything. But yeah, let's do it. But I'll tell you what it was the confidence I had in the ability to do it. Cause this shop called me and they're like, this needs to go up in 2 weeks. He's like, I don't have anybody that can do this that fast. And I was just like, don't worry about it. I've done sites in half the time. And believe me, like it's messy and it's like, it's hectic and it's crazy and things will break and things won't be like perfect when they launch, but like the timeline is the scope. You know what I mean? It's like the 2 weeks is the scope and we're going to do whatever we can between now and then. Like we're going to do everything in our power to get this website up. And so that was how it started. And it was the Biden website for a minute. And then we got a call one Sunday to stop working, and we did. And we sat on our hands for about a week. And then they came back to us and they said, hey, it's Kamala. And nothing's changed because it's the same campaign organization, same contracts and all of that. And so it was just right from there. It was full steam ahead as KamalaHarris.com. And we got a little more time because the deadline kept pushing. It was like, okay, let's launch before the DNC. Let's launch after the DNC, et cetera. But like, so we ended up being like a 4-week project or something like that. But it was crazy. It was crazy. We were like, we never met Kamala, obviously, but we were working with like her team, and it is the biggest thing that we've ever touched, for sure. It's by far. I mean, we were talking about brand names before when I was starting the agency, like wanting to be able to say like, oh, my client's Google. Yeah. I mean, I've pretty much gone 15 years. I mean, we do small projects for like, we've done small projects for big names like Spotify, YouTube, New York Times, but like minuscule projects, not even worth, like, I can't say they're a client, right? But for me to be like, yeah, we did like Kamala Harris, that's definitely the biggest brand we've ever encountered. So it's been amazing to to just have that in our portfolio and to be able to talk about it.
So if you were to go back to your kitchen table, your dad and your brother reading the sports section, you're checking to see what movie's playing, and say to your dad, hey, 30 years from now, here's what I'm going to be up to. What do you think he has to say about that?
My dad was an entrepreneur too. He was an electrician, but he ran his own business the whole time. So it's funny. I grew up thinking of him as an electrician, but later in life, I was like, oh no, he's actually an entrepreneur. He'd be extremely proud of me. He'd probably give me a pat on the back, but you know what he would do? He'd be telling all his friends, like at the bar and all the barber shop and whoever. Because I remember when I made senior editor at FHM, he was going around talking. I'd run into people. They'd be like, "Hey, Dad says you're doing really well in New York at the magazine. You're a senior editor." I'm like, "He told you that?"
Yeah,
that's definitely what it would be, and it would be nice. I mean, he's not around anymore, but it would be nice to get that like pat on the back, you know.
Well, Tom, I lost my mom a few years ago as well, and it sounds like they were cut from the same cloth because I grew up in this town, like 1,600 people, and that was the experience. I'd like, when I'd go home, you just run into someone at the corner store and like, I was talking to your mom the other day and they said that you just said blah, blah, blah. And like in great detail. And I'm like,
yes, right,
I'm like,
right.
Okay, well, thanks for the support. And then when you lose that person, you do realize it's like, oh man, like I found it annoying at the time, but
yeah,
just have
it's really sweet. It's really sweet.
Cheerleader.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, listen, we could have gone on for another 2 hours, but
definitely.
I so appreciate you doing this, and people can check you guys out at northstreetcreative.com. We talked about the Kamala work, but there's many other awesome case studies and work on there. and a really great team you guys have built. So thank you so much for doing this. Hopefully it can be part one of many.
Thanks. This was a lot of fun.
Journey Map is hosted by me, Dave Hale, and produced by the website production company Craft&Crew. To learn more, visit us at craftandcrew.ca. Thanks for taking this journey with us.